I don't think it's going to last very long. And so when I finally left the band, obviously, dumping on him in a tour, which I don't feel bad about. Didn't then, don't now.
From there, Jeffrey was like, okay, I'm going to get the New Gun Club together.
I'd had it with playing in the band I was in for various reasons. And I told the booking agent, who also booked the Gun Club, that I would no longer intended to play with the Pantherburns after this tour. The booking agent said, I think I might have something for you.
Duckworth could play a lot of shit. I mean, he was a really, really awesome guitar player.
They ended up hiring Dee Pop and me, and we were the new additions to the Gun Club along with Patricia Morrison.
Patricia was kind of the odd person out in the band because she was really quiet.
She took me to an Irish bar the first night I met her and talked to me about what to expect from Jeffrey, that he was somewhat inconsiderate and volatile.
You'd see her in the daytime with her hair down, and it was like this, librarian. And then, 2 cans of Aquanet later, and it was...
I was learning the songs off Miami, and I got a call to come and record. Apparently, Tex and the Horsehead session had canceled, and I was to come to New York that night and record. Of course, I think we rehearsed that night and started recording the next day. Recording these songs that became the EP Death Party.
The record was made in the studio. It was really written. I never had worked in a situation where tracks weren't written yet, but on a piece of paper. And when we played House on Highland Avenue, Jeffrey basically didn't have a song. He hummed it to me in the cans and went da la 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 la. Okay, just play 4 measures of do do ba ba do do ba, and then okay, after 4 do a little roll because we're going to be into a chorus.
I think that was kind of a missed opportunity, and too bad we didn't get something a little bit more thorough from that lineup, because the live shows were intense.
We played the East Coast for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then went to Europe, where we played about 56 dates in almost as many days.
The French tour we did was so out of control on drugs. I remember the first gig we did, we played 8 songs for 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Dee had a history of using junk and could do it. Dee could drink heavily.
I left on that tour with a broken hand. I had a bunch of broken fingers and went to a doctor the day before we were supposed to leave, and the doctor said, you have 3 choices. You can re-break the hand and put it in a cast, put a cast on it just the way it was, or the other thing was just go on the fucking tour and leave it alone and let it heal eventually, which is what I did.
Dee's knuckle was way back. Oh, I don't know how far back in his hand, from having been in a fight.
So needless to say, it hurt like a motherfucker, and I needed all the self-medication I could find, which was not something I wasn't probably going to do anyway, but in this case, I had an excuse. We got off a plane in Paris, and the promoter goes, oh, you need something to wake you up? And we were like, yeah, we're expecting, white lines, and he gives us dope instead. So I remember we had to go up this spiral staircase up to the stage, and we're walking up, and the first person that did the line goes, guys, this isn't coke. We'd be throwing up over the railing and, hitting probably Patricia, who was the last one who wasn't doing any drugs at the beginning of the tour. But, that was the first day of the tour, and that was the mildest part.
Got to France, and we get there, and we're supposed to sign records. Well, they're giving us Miami, which is the new Gun Club record. Of course, since Dee and I aren't on there, and since we've been drinking, we started signing that record and, other records. Eddie Cochran records, Sibelius records.
We did this gig in Paris in a festival outside where a Gun Club opened for U2. And the promoter's kids...
These children were 9, 10, 12, I suppose. And they were a band. And they played a version of Sex Beat. They played a version of Sex Beat in French.
And they were really cool little kids. They were all decked out in punk rock gear and, creepers and leopard skin and little mohawks, and they were like just fucking adorable, and you just saw them and you're like, you guys play Sex Beat, you guys have to play for us.
We asked the promoters if these kids could play Sex Beat before we did. Of course not. No, they cannot. So naturally, we had to have them up there. So what we did is we had them stand around nearby, behind the fence. I think there was a small fence. And right before we played, we pulled them up on stage, gave them our equipment, and said go. And they started playing Sex Beat.
But they only knew this one song, and they didn't even know how to end it. So they just kept repeating verse after verse after verse, and then they go back to the top and go. So they probably ran through the song like 4 or 5 times. And like they played it for about 20 minutes, like really, truly 20 minutes. And U2, especially Bono, was just livid, man. He was just like, what are these fucking kids doing? So me and Duckworth and Patricia had to actually go out and physically carry these kids off the stage because they didn't know how to actually end their song. We were all really trashed anyway, so we were making the promoter give us each a case of beer, and we were just tossing the cans back into like U2's equipment, because of course we had to like set up in front of U2. It was like, because they were U2. And but I remember then finally when they played, they had to spend another 20 minutes taking out all these cans out of their bass drum, which was right behind me. So I kept throwing my cans into their bass drum as they came out, and it went boom, bang, and it was like all these cans rattling, so I had to stop again.
I always felt that Jeffrey was very poor at drinking. He would have 2 or 3 drinks and then he'd cry. I remember being with him in New Orleans. He expressed an interest in scoring some heroin, so I hooked up with a musician friend. And I can remember sitting in a car, having to explain to Jeffrey what Dilaudid was. While the New Orleans musician looked on in disgust. Of course, we were wicked little fucks in our early 20s.
Our tour manager had this farm, and on a couple of days off, we went to this farm to chill out. Except we had nothing there but drugs and booze. There was like no food. And Jimmy, the tour manager, goes, "Hey, partner, check out this gun." He goes, "There's Jeffrey." Nobody expected me to really start shooting over Jeffrey's head, but Jeffrey's like in the field, and you could it's like cornfields. You could see Jeffrey's head ducking down, and like running through the field, going, "Hey, what the fuck you doing? Stop!" And I was like, "Jeffrey, you motherfucker! This is the last time you're gonna pull this shit." And he's like, "You didn't fuck with me too much more ever again."
I can remember torturing Jeffrey by doing versions of his lyrics. I remember Dee and I did Texas Serenade as Yogi Bear and Boo Boo. And I can just remember him telling me, "Stop!"
He would do stuff like want to arm wrestle me and things like that. And it would be pretty queer after a while. It's like, "Jeffrey, come on now. I know I can beat you tonight." Good Jeff, it's like, be 4 in the morning, we'd all be toast. And be like, "Hey, D, let's arm wrestle." Like, Jeffrey, But he would do strange shit like that in the middle of the night.
D was really the kind of person that Jeffrey wanted to portray himself as being. D really had used junk at length. D really could drink a lot. D really did fight. Jeffrey was never good at all these things.
We shared a lot of things, and I thought that was genuine and not just for whatever reasons, or I'm going to be with D because he's cool for 10 minutes right now or whatever. But I generally, we did stuff together that was, we talked about a lot of shit, and books and art and whatever, and I think we thought of each other as close friends. But Jeffrey was a really bad business person. He was the gun club, he owned the gun club, he, called the shots or didn't call the shots, and he had management, and between it all, they figured out all the money from the last tours, and there was nothing left to pay anybody else, I don't think, except for dirt, chump change. That's the way bands are, it's like, You know, there's always the money fuck-ups. The money fucks up everything, generally.
Money fucked it up, but, you know, worse than money fucking it up was some sort of I guess it's money fucking it up. It was like a conservatism that, you know, or like a chicken shit, you know, safety mechanism of the people that wanted to make money and thought they knew, you know, where the, you know, how to slay the golden goose and do it, that they were just going to ignore like a whole generation of rock and musicians. You know, like they had the nerve to think that like the music that comes off, you know, just off the street and out of the, you know, out of the garages and all this shit, you know, isn't some sort of natural outpouring of you know, the nation's music.
I feel an affinity for anybody in any band anywhere, you know, because we're all in the same boat against the shitheads, you know. So, you know, I always felt that music was like the mafia, you know, we're all in the thing together, you know, we're going to fight the outside world.
I think Jeffrey's entire thing was a commercial impediment. I mean, he was intellectually too intense. The music was too indie for mainstream acceptance, and that voice was like kind of that wounded caterwaul, which is not pleasing to the, you know, brain-damaged, mediocre masses who lap up FM fodder, you know, perpetrated by Clear Channel and their cronies.
In fact, a lot of the great bands in LA couldn't even make albums, like the Alley Cats and different great bands. People never saw the Alley Cats when we got to get that down and, you know, make an album immediately. They didn't even get to make an album until 79 or 80, and they've been rocking the house for a few years at that point. All the London bands had all been signed and gone.
He was going to be at the mercy of distribution anyway, and advertising, you know. And bands don't have that money, you know. Just as you're starting out, you have to get signed. Unfortunately, when you get signed, usually they sit on you and they don't promote you, you know. Or they try and change you, which has always been a puzzle to me. Like, why sign a band and then try and change them completely from what you signed? I never understood that, you know. It's like a guy gets married and the chick changes him, you know. So no other chicks will fancy him anymore, you know.
You know, you see this kind of shambling screw-up. And I go, what can he do? I mean, you don't even want to give him a car. You know, you're like, I need to do my laundry. We'll do it for you. I mean, he'll never even figure out a washing machine. Not because he's stupid, just he's one of those people like, him have a straight job, it could never work. He could never work in that world. It's like you could never have Iggy be a waiter.
He wasn't an accountant, and he wasn't that savvy, like, you know, like this is a business in my band. You know, it wasn't like that.
Don't give him a real job. They can't balance a checkbook. They can't do anything, but they can do that thing. Jeffrey's one of those guys.
I think Jeffrey decided he didn't want to be around Dee anymore. I think he was intimidated by Dee and just failed to call him back to come play some more shows.
If I wanted to be Jeffrey's friend, it was better that I wasn't in the band with him. And I wanted to stay his friend and be friends with him. And that meant, you know, me doing what I needed to do. So, I mean, it was Jeffrey's band, and I wasn't looking for a democratic thing by any means, but it was pretty chaotic, so.
We played some shows in Los Angeles without Dee. That would have been with Terry Graham back on drums, and Terry Graham is an excellent drummer. He really gave the band a lift in a way that you could really feel on stage, in a way very few drummers could. We played a few shows in Los Angeles, and we were going to play in Australia, but neither Terry nor I could get any information on how much we were to get paid for this.
We met Jeffrey at the airport in San Francisco with Patricia. Jeffrey was being an enormous asshole that night, and basically told us, well, you know, if you want to be in the band, there's the gate, there's the doorway into the plane, get on the plane and I'll see you in Australia. And Jim and I just kind of looked at each other like, get on that plane with a surly guy who we really just don't like anymore, and fly for 16, 18 hours for a handful of shows we have no idea if we'll make any money from. So we basically said, you know what, we're going to go rent a car and we're going to drive back to Los Angeles.
We really felt that we were getting dicked around, and I think finally they said, well, you can save your per diem. You'll have something that way. That's the daily operating expenses. for eating and what have you.
Patricia was very brave. We told her what we were going to do, but she went ahead and got on the plane and went over there with him. I respect her for that. I thought it was very brave. But Jim and I just, we got the fuck out of Dodge.
And there's this big tour booked, and, you know, everyone was freaking out. So Jeffrey, like, you know, a day or two after getting there, gave me a call and said, like, can you come to Australia, like, now? And I was like, well, yeah, of course. You ask, I shall come. And also I was, like, really off my, you know, the Cramps was definitely off the books by then. And so we went and did an Australian tour with me, Patricia, Jeff, and 2 Australian pickup guys. So we did this crazy tour. It was pretty ramshackle and makeshift, but a lot of fun. I think we were taking a lot of drugs, but it was at a time when drugs were kind of still working in our favor and still hadn't imploded on us at the time. You know, there was still, I think we weren't full on drug addicts. We were, you know, weekenders or whatever. And so we, you know, made some crazy alcohol and drug-filled celebrations. And people, I think, had fun and loved it. You know, Australians are such yabos anyway, and they dug it and understood us. So we came back from this Australian tour, and somehow Terry was back in the band, or whatever reasons, because there was, you know, because he was the best thing we had going. So Jeffrey had already written songs by then, like some of the Las Vegas Story songs, and we were still on Animal Records on Chris Stein's label, which Miami had been on in the Death Party EP. And so we started recording in Los Angeles at Ocean Way Studios. And I think Chris had gotten ill at this time. So someone at Chrysalis was overseeing the project. And so I think maybe they suggested this guy, Jeff Irick, who ended up producing the record.
The Las Vegas Story was certainly, production-wise, kind of like a more legit album. It was not produced by a friend, you know, even though Chris D and Chris Stein did a great job with the time and money provided to them. It was their first really, you know, someone put a lot of TLC and money into that production. You can certainly hear it.
The one thing about the Gun Club and us, and like, you know, we had very excessive behavior, you know, especially Jeffrey and myself. And the thing is, we always really were able to pull it together for recording. Was always a serious thing to us.
Las Vegas Story was great because it was bringing everyone back together, everyone from Los Angeles. You got Kid back playing with Jeff, which was a great thing because that was the initial forming of the Gun Club, and Kid and Jeff worked really well together. And you had Patricia on bass and Terry on drums, 2 original bags. And so seeing all those people back together again was a very good thing.
Well, here it is, Las Vegas, and the inspiration for Las Vegas Story, part of the inspiration. Actually, Vegas has always been an inspirational place for a gun club. We're always making pilgrimages here, always thinking about it, the trashy side of it, the mob-run Vegas. Basically the Vegas that doesn't exist anymore, but, you know, it's one of those things, if it definitely inspired us, no matter what, and if it inspired us, you can bet it inspired Las Vegas Story. This is like the only place you can find old Vegas, but it's so fucking ratted out that you know, you can't come down there, and these places, they look decent from the outside, but It's basically one giant crack boulevard, in a sense, the underbelly of America. I mean, that was always Jeff's thing.
Jeffrey's escape was blues and, you know, Burroughs and a lot of the dark, seedier things, whether it's drugs or just who he chose to, like, hang out with, whether, you know, girls.
You know, like Bukowski says, you gotta be on the lowest rung or something, and he dug that. He wrote about being down and out.
One of the cool things I liked about Las Vegas Story, besides the fact that it was, you know, it just had a great sound, great producer. But I mean, like Dave Alvin played on that, laid down some really good tracks. And by this time, Jeffrey was really into his lead guitar thing. I mean, he was playing guitar full time by now.
After the Australia thing, yeah, Jeffrey said that, you know, he had been working with Jim Duckworth, who was such a virtuoso and like really amazing a guitar player who could play everything. And it was really great, and we really realized that my style and his style really complemented each other, and I think that's part telepathic because we had played together for so long, and I learned guitar from him.
Jeffrey Lee's guitar chops with all the touring had gotten, you know, pretty good. He played like Jeffrey Lee Pierce, you know, and the band, the guitar sound of the band was there, all the little parts and nuances of you know, it was noisy, but it made sense, you know, and it was all kind of loosely worked out. And then he called me up and asked if I wanted to play lead guitar on a couple things, and I thought, I don't know what I would do, but I went down to the studio, and I think I was playing a Fender Mustang, and yeah, or maybe I was playing, there may have been a guitar just laying around there. It might have been that kind of thing.
Ry Cooder was doing actually the Paris, Texas soundtrack at the time in the same studio. So there was like really some of his cool stuff there. So we really didn't use it all. But we picked up a thing or two.
And just, plugged in through a Marshall and just made a racket, you know, and we did it a couple of times, and that was it.
That's the thing, I think, with that Las Vegas Story is just it's a good record, but it's a little bit uneven. It's a different record.
It was very much born out of the Brian Geisen cut-up theory. And that, like I said, this was a time when we were influenced, like a lot, by free jazz and literature, and like a lot of beat literature, especially.
Jeffrey was a huge romantic, as was, in a really insane way, I don't know if people agree with this, Burroughs. It's an incredible vision of another door into of a whole other world right in front of your own nose. And that appeals to Jeffrey in a super powerful way.
Jeffrey was very, 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 you know, taken with William Burroughs, and, you know, had met William Burroughs and, you know, done some readings with them, and they went to his house when we played in Lawrence, Kansas.
Were you trying to make me work?
The Las Vegas Story tour, it was like, I think we went through America back and forth a few times, I think, and then we went to Europe, and it seemed to go on and on and on. I really loved the Gun Club then. I mean, I was really proud of the band. I think that there was a real magic happening in those live shows for at least the beginning of that tour.
Who's got drugs? Give them up.
But there was a lot